The first thing Marcus Chin noticed about the creature wasn't its size, though it was massive enough to dwarf most Earth elephants. It wasn't the biomechanical augmentations grafted into its flesh, glowing with dying energy cells. It wasn't even the fact that something this alien was lying in a crater on what used to be downtown Phoenix. It was the way the creature's eyes tracked him as he approached, filled with an intelligence that spoke of awareness, of understanding that death was coming, and of a resignation that made Marcus's chest tighten. "Stay back, Shun." Sergeant Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm. "We don't know what that thing is capable of." Marcus ignored the order, his boots crunching on crystallized sand as he moved closer. The alien war machine, whatever it was, had crashed here 3 days ago during the retreat. The hegemony forces had pulled back after their failed invasion attempt, leaving behind destroyed ships, scattered weapons, and apparently this. The creature was roughly 20 feet long, built like a cross between a rhinoceros and some kind of deep-sea predator. Its skin was a mottled purple-black, scarred from countless battles. Biomechanical implants covered nearly half its body, cables and tubes running beneath translucent flesh. Most of the technology was dead now, the organic components slowly failing without maintenance. But it was still alive. Marcus crouched just outside what he estimated was the creature's striking range. Its breathing was labored, and a thick, blue-green fluid leaked from several wounds. One of its 6 legs was clearly broken, bent at an unnatural angle. The massive head, easily the size of a small car, rested against the ground. But those eyes, 3 of them arranged in a triangular pattern on the left side of its skull, never left Marcus's face. "What are you?" Marcus whispered, more to himself than expecting an answer. The creature's mouth opened slightly, revealing rows of serrated teeth designed for tearing metal as easily as flesh. A low sound emerged, somewhere between a moan and a mechanical hum. The universal translator in Marcus's helmet picked up fragments, but couldn't make sense of it. "Chun, get away from that thing." Rodriguez was shouting now. "The science team will be here in an hour to study it." Marcus knew what that meant. They'd poke and prod and dissect while it was still alive, trying to understand hegemony bioweapons. The creature seemed to understand too, because its eyes closed briefly in what looked almost like surrender. That's when Marcus noticed something else. Around the creature's thick neck was a collar of sorts, but not like any restraint device he'd seen. It was organic, grown rather than manufactured, and it was covered in symbols that pulsed with a faint bioluminescent glow. As he watched, the glow was fading, the symbols disappearing one by one. The creature made that sound again, and this time the translator caught something no longer needed. Marcus felt his breath catch. It could speak, or at least the technology grafted into it could translate its thoughts into something approaching human language. "You understand me?" Marcus asked. The massive head lifted slightly, and the creature regarded him with what could only be described as surprise. When it spoke again, the words came through his translator with mechanical precision, but underlying exhaustion. "You speak to Kithra? Strange. Makers never spoke to Kithra. Only commands through pain collar. Kithra. It had a name." Marcus glanced around. The rest of his squad was maintaining a perimeter, but they were focused outward, watching for hegemony stragglers. No one was paying attention to his conversation with what they assumed was just a dying alien weapon. "The Makers," Marcus said carefully. "They're gone. They left you here." "Yes." The word carried weight, resignation, and something else. Relief? War ended. Kithra no longer needed. Pain collar dying. Soon Kithra dies too. Marcus looked at the collar again. Up close, he could see it was more than just a control device. Tubes ran from it into the creature's neck, pulsing weakly. It was keeping the creature alive, but barely. "How long have you been their weapon?" Marcus asked. Kithra does not know. Many battles. Many enemies destroyed. Kithra was made for war, lived for war. Now war is over for Makers. The creature's tone was matter of fact, but Marcus caught something underneath it. Pain, yes, but also confusion. This being had been designed and possibly bred for one purpose, and now that purpose was gone. What happens now? Marcus found himself asking. Now, Kithra dies. Is natural. Weapons are discarded when battle ends. The casual acceptance in the creature's voice made Marcus angry in a way that surprised him. Here was a thinking, feeling being that had been treated as nothing more than a disposable tool. The hegemony had engineered it for violence, used it to kill, and then abandoned it when they no longer needed it. You don't have to die, Marcus said suddenly. The three eyes focused on him with sharp attention. Human speaks strangely. All things die. Yes, but not like this. Not abandoned and alone. Kithra was quiet for a long moment. When spoke again, its voice was softer, almost wondering. Kithra has never spoken of death with another. Makers commanded, Kithra obeyed. Enemies screamed, Kithra killed. No words between. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He reached for his field medical kit, pulling out a bioscanner. May I examine your injuries? The question seemed to surprise Kithra even more than Marcus's earlier words. Human asked permission? Strange. Makers took what they wished. I'm not your maker, Marcus said firmly. I'm asking. After a moment that seemed to stretch forever, Kithra lowered its massive head to the ground in what Marcus interpreted as consent. He approached carefully, scanner in hand. The readings were fascinating and horrifying in equal measure. The creature's biology was complex beyond anything in Earth's fossil record, but it had been extensively modified. The biomechanical systems weren't just grafted on. They were integrated at the cellular level. Life support, neural interfaces, weapon systems, all woven into the creature's very DNA. But the most disturbing discovery was the pain collar itself. It wasn't just a control device. It was what was keeping Kithra alive. The modifications to its biology were so extensive that it couldn't survive without technological support. The hegemony had made it utterly dependent on them. Your makers, Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. They changed you. Made you need that collar to live. Yes, Kithra knows. Without makers' technology, Kithra dies. Is proper. Tools should not outlive their purpose. The resignation in its voice made Marcus want to punch something. Instead, he studied the scanner readings more carefully. The collar was failing, but slowly. Kithra probably had days, maybe weeks before the life support systems shut down completely. What if there was another way? Marcus said, human speaks in riddles. What if someone else could maintain the technology? Keep you alive? Kithra's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Marcus remembered that this creature had been designed to kill. Why would human do this? Kithra is enemy. Kithra has destroyed human settlements, killed human soldiers. The honesty was brutal, but Marcus appreciated it. This creature wasn't trying to hide what it had done or make excuses. It had been a weapon, and weapons destroyed things. Because, Marcus said slowly, working through his own thoughts as he spoke, you were made to be a weapon, but you're not just a weapon. You think, you feel, you have a name. The war is over, and what you were made for doesn't have to define what you become. Silence stretched between them. Around the crater, Marcus could hear the distant sounds of the cleanup operation. Vehicles moving, soldiers calling to each other. Normal sounds of humans dealing with the aftermath of battle. Soon the science teams would arrive, and this conversation would be over. Kithra does not understand, the creature said finally. What would Kithra become if not weapon? It was such a fundamental question that Marcus felt the weight of it. Here was a being that had never been allowed to consider its own existence beyond its function as a tool of war. It literally didn't know what else was possible. I don't know, Marcus admitted. But we could find out together. Together? The word came out with mechanical emphasis, as if the translator was having trouble with the concept. Yes, if you want to live, if you want to discover what else you could be, I'll help you. Kithra stared at him for a long moment. Why? It was a fair question, and Marcus found himself thinking about it seriously. Why was he offering to help an alien war machine that had killed his fellow soldiers? Was it pity? Curiosity? Some misplaced sense of justice? No, he realized. It was simpler than that. Because everyone deserves a choice about their own life, Marcus said. And you've never had one. The creature's breathing changed, becoming more rapid. The biomechanical systems flickered as if responding to some internal change. For a moment, Marcus worried he'd somehow triggered a defensive response. Then, he realized Kithra was crying. The tears weren't water-based, but a clear, silvery fluid that leaked from the corners of its eyes and caught the light like mercury. The universal translator picked up soft sounds that it couldn't interpret, but Marcus didn't need a translation to understand grief. Kithra has never been given choice, the creature whispered. Always commands. Always pain, if disobedience. Choice is yours, Marcus finished. The choice is yours, Kithra. Do you want to live? The massive head lifted, and for the first time since Marcus had approached, he saw something other than resignation in those alien eyes. Hope, maybe, or perhaps just the beginning of it. Yes, Kithra said, and the word carried the weight of a lifetime of suppressed desires. Kithra chooses to live. Marcus nodded and activated his comm. Rodriguez, this is Chun. I need an immediate priority channel to command. Chun, what the hell are you doing over there? Something that's going to get me court-martialed, Marcus replied, looking directly into Kithra's eyes. But it's the right thing to do. He had no idea how he was going to convince his superiors to spare an alien war beast. He had no idea if human technology could interface with hegemony biomechanics. He had no idea if Kithra could truly change from what it had been designed to be. But as he watched hope bloom in the eyes of a creature that had never been allowed to hope before, Marcus knew he had to try. What is your plan? Human Marcus Chun. Kithra asked, having apparently absorbed his name from the comm chatter. First, Marcus said, checking his scanner readings again. We keep you alive long enough to figure out how to keep you alive. Then, we see what kind of being you choose to become. And if your kind wishes to destroy Kithra for past actions, Marcus met its gaze steadily. Then, they'll have to go through me first. For the first time since their conversation began, Marcus saw something he hadn't expected in Kithra's expression. The creature was smiling, or at least doing the closest thing its alien features could manage. Human Marcus Chun is strange, Kithra said. But Kithra thinks this strangeness is good. In the distance, Marcus could hear the rumble of approaching vehicles. The science team was arriving ahead of schedule. Time was running out for quiet conversations and personal decisions. Soon this would become a matter of military protocol and government oversight. But for now, in this moment, it was just a human and an alien who had both chosen something different than what the war had made them. Marcus started downloading the bioscanner data to his personal storage unit. Whatever happened next, he'd need proof of what Kithra truly was beyond its function as a weapon. Evidence that there was a person inside the war machine, someone who deserved the chance to choose their own path. Are you ready for this to get complicated? Marcus asked. Kithra's mechanical laugh sounded like grinding gears, but somehow it was the most hopeful sound Marcus had heard in months. Kithra has been weapon of war, the creature replied. Complicated cannot be worse than simple. The argument in the command tent had been going on for 6 hours, and Marcus could feel exhaustion weighing down his bones. General Harrison sat behind a field desk covered in data pads, medical reports, and what Marcus assumed were legal documents that would determine whether he faced court-martial or commendation. Let me understand this correctly, Corporal Chun, the general said, his voice carrying the kind of calm that usually preceded either promotion or execution. You want the United Earth Defense Force to provide life support and medical care to an enemy combatant that has been responsible for the deaths of over 300 of our soldiers. Yes, sir, Marcus replied without hesitation. An enemy combatant that is, by all technical definitions, a biological weapon of mass destruction. Yes, sir. And your justification for this request is that it asked you nicely? Marcus felt his jaw tighten. No, sir. My justification is that it's a sentient being capable of choice, and it chose to live as something other than a weapon. Dr. Sarah Kim, the xenobiologist who had spent the last 3 days studying Kithra's bioscans, cleared her throat. General, if I may, the creature's neural activity patterns are unlike anything we've seen in Earth species, but they're consistent with higher-order cognitive function. It demonstrates self-awareness, emotional processing, and what we would classify as consciousness by any reasonable metric. Consciousness or not, interrupted Colonel Hayes from the legal department, it's still technically a weapon of war. There's no legal precedent for granting asylum or protection status to enemy military equipment. Military equipment doesn't usually have names, personal preferences, and the ability to hold philosophical discussions about the nature of existence. Dr. Kim shot back. Marcus had been listening to variations of this argument for hours. The scientists were fascinated, the military was cautious, the politicians were worried about precedent, and the lawyers were having nightmares about the implications. Meanwhile, Kithra was dying slowly in a containment facility, kept alive by a jury-rigged life support system that Dr. Kim's team had cobbled together. Corporal Chun, General Harrison said, focusing his attention back on Marcus. I've read your report multiple times, but I need to understand something. Why? Why risk your career, your freedom, possibly your life, for an alien that was trying to kill you a week ago? Marcus had been asking himself the same question. The easy answer was that it was the right thing to do. But the general wasn't looking for easy answers. Sir, I've been fighting the hegemony for 3 years, Marcus said slowly. I've seen what they do to their own people, how they treat any form of life as either useful or disposable. When I found Kithra, I saw what they had done to it. They didn't just use it as a weapon. They made it incapable of being anything else. They took away its choice at a fundamental biological level. Marcus paused, gathering his thoughts. If we abandon Kithra now, if we let it die because it's inconvenient or complicated, then we're not any better than the hegemony. We're just more selective about who we consider disposable. The tent fell silent. General Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying Marcus with the expression of someone who had made too many difficult decisions in his lifetime. Dr. Kim, the general said finally, in your professional opinion, is there a realistic chance of keeping this creature alive long-term with our current technology? Dr. Kim glanced at Marcus before answering. The biomechanical integration is incredibly sophisticated. The hegemony essentially turned Kithra into a living cyborg, with artificial organs supplementing or replacing natural ones. The control collar isn't just a restraint device. It's a life support system, neural interface, and biological regulator all in one. She activated a holographic display that showed a detailed scan of Kithra's internal structure. However, we've made significant progress in understanding the technology. Dr. Rodriguez's team has successfully interfaced our quantum processors with the collar's control systems, and we've managed to stabilize the creature's vital signs. What about the weapons systems? Colonel Hayes asked. Extensive but largely disabled, Dr. Kim replied. The biocannons in its limbs require specific chemical compounds that its body no longer produces. The energy discharge capabilities are dependent on power cells that are nearly depleted. In its current state, Kithra is about as dangerous as a very large, very intelligent elephant. Elephants can still kill people, the colonel pointed out. So can humans, Marcus said. But we don't execute people for having the capability to cause harm. General Harrison stood up and walked to the tent's entrance, looking out toward the containment facility where Kithra was being held. There's another issue we need to discuss. The media has gotten wind of this situation. Hero Soldier Saves Alien War Beast is trending on 3 different networks. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He hadn't considered the public relations aspect of his decision. The good news, the general continued, is that public opinion seems to be largely supportive. Apparently, people like the idea of showing mercy to a defeated enemy. The bad news is that this situation is now way above my pay grade. He turned back to face the group. I've received direct orders from Earth Command. They want to see both Corporal Chun and the creature transported to Luna Station for further evaluation. Luna Station? Dr. Kim looked confused. Sir, that's a research facility. Why would they want? Because General Harrison said grimly, the Defense Council is very interested in hegemony biotechnology, and they're particularly interested in the possibility of reverse engineering weapons that think for themselves. Marcus felt cold dread settling in his chest. They want to turn Kithra into a weapon for Earth. I don't know what they want, the general replied. But I do know that in 48 hours, you and your alien friend are going to be on a transport to Luna, whether you like it or not. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Earth Command wouldn't be interested in preserving Kithra's newfound autonomy. They'd see it as a resource to be exploited, just like the hegemony had. All his efforts to give Kithra a choice would be meaningless if Earth scientists simply turned it into a different kind of weapon. Sir, Marcus said carefully, is there any way to delay the transfer? Give us more time to understand Kithra's condition. Negative. The order came directly from Admiral Chun. No relation, before you ask, and it's not negotiable. Marcus's mind raced. 48 hours wasn't enough time to establish Kithra's legal status or build a case for its protection. But maybe it was enough time for something else. General, I request permission to spend the remaining time with Kithra to help prepare it for the transfer. General Harrison studied him with narrowed eyes. Corporal, you're not planning to do anything stupid, are you? No, sir. Just want to make sure Kithra understands what's happening. Very well. But you'll be under constant surveillance, and any attempt to interfere with the transfer will result in immediate arrest. Is that clear? Crystal, sir. An hour later, Marcus sat in the containment facility across from Kithra's massive form. The alien war beast was connected to an array of human medical equipment that looked absurdly small against its bulk. Monitors displayed vital signs that Dr. Kim's team was still learning to interpret. Human Marcus Chun appears distressed, Kithra observed, its voice coming through speakers connected to the translation system. Have the makers returned? No, Marcus said, but we might be going somewhere that's not much better. He explained the situation as clearly as he could, watching Kithra's 3 eyes track his words with obvious intelligence. The creature listened without interruption, occasionally tilting its massive head in what Marcus had learned was a gesture of contemplation. So Earthmakers wish to study Kithra as hegemony makers did, Kithra said finally. To understand weapons making. I think so. I'm sorry, Kithra. I tried to give you a choice, but I might have just delayed the inevitable. Marcus expected anger, disappointment, maybe even accusation. Instead, Kithra made the grinding sound that he'd learned was laughter. Human Marcus Chun speaks foolishness, the creature said with what sounded like affection. Kithra has experienced choice. 3 days of choice. 3 days of speaking as equal, of thinking beyond kill commands, of imagining what could be instead of only what is. The alien shifted carefully, mindful of the medical equipment attached to its body. 3 days is more choice than Kithra had an entire existence before. Even if choice ends, it existed. Kithra will remember. Marcus felt something breaking in his chest. Here was a being that had been enslaved its entire life, and it was grateful for 3 days of freedom. It doesn't have to end, Marcus said quietly. There might be another option. Kithra's eyes focused on him with sharp attention. Human Marcus, Chana's plan? Marcus glanced at the security cameras mounted around the room. He was definitely being watched and probably recorded. Whatever he said next would be analyzed by intelligence specialists and used as evidence if things went wrong. But looking at Kithra, at the hope still flickering in those alien eyes despite everything, Marcus made his choice. The transport to Luna Station, he said in a conversational tone, will require a stop at the orbital platform for refueling and cargo transfer. There's always a delay during transfer operations. Lots of confusion, people moving around, systems being switched from one ship to another. Kithra's eyes seemed to brighten with understanding. Delays create opportunities. Sometimes, and sometimes, if someone were to ensure that the life support systems experienced a temporary malfunction during transfer, it might be necessary to conduct emergency repairs at the nearest facility. Emergency repairs could require civilian medical assistance, Kithra added, its voice taking on a thoughtful quality. Civilian facilities might have different protocols than military installations. Marcus nodded. Civilians tend to be more interested in medical ethics than military applications. This plan would require Kithra to trust human Marcus Chun completely, the creature said after a moment. Yes, and it would require me to trust you the same way. Kithra was quiet for a long time, processing the implications. If plan fails, consequences for human Marcus Chun would be severe. Probably, if plan succeeds, Kithra would be dependent on human Marcus Chun for survival. Not dependent, Marcus corrected. Partners. Equals. You'd help me understand your technology. I'd help you navigate human society. We'd figure out together what kind of life you want to build. Partnership. Kithra repeated the word slowly. Strange concept. Kithra has only known hierarchy. Makers above, enemies below. Then, it's time you learn something new. The massive creature shifted again, and Marcus heard the mechanical whir of motors as Kithra carefully extended one of its limbs toward him. The appendage was obviously artificial, a biomechanical construct of metal, ceramics, and organic tissue. At its tip, instead of the weapon cluster that had once been there, was something that looked almost like a hand. Marcus reached out and touched the artificial flesh. It was warm, and he could feel the pulse of circulatory systems beneath the surface. Kithra's version of a handshake. Partners, Kithra said, and there was something like wonder in its voice. Kithra chooses to trust human Marcus Chun. And I choose to trust you, Marcus replied. Over the next 2 days, they planned carefully. Marcus uses access to military networks to study the transfer procedures, identifying weak points and opportunities. Kithra shared information about its biological systems, helping him understand which components were critical for survival and which could be temporarily disabled without permanent harm. The plan was risky, probably illegal, and almost certainly impossible. It depended on split-second timing, technical knowledge neither of them fully possessed, and a level of trust that should have been impossible between former enemies. But as Marcus looked into Kithra's eyes, seeing intelligence, hope, and something that might have been friendship, he knew they had to try. Because some choices were worth the risk, even when the consequences could destroy everything you'd built. Especially then. The transport to Luna Station was scheduled to depart at 0800 hours the next morning. By 0900, Marcus Chun would either be under arrest for treason, or he and his alien partner would be free to discover what kind of future they could build together. Either way, Kithra would face that future as a being with choices, not as a discarded weapon. And sometimes that was enough to make any risk worthwhile. The orbital platform designated Series 7 was a maze of docking bays, cargo holds, and transfer tunnels that stretched for miles in every direction. Marcus had been counting on the chaos and confusion that always accompanied major ship transfers, but he hadn't expected quite this level of pandemonium. Transport 7 Alpha, you are cleared for docking bay 12, came the crackling voice over the comm system. Transport 7 Alpha, please acknowledge. This is 7 Alpha, their pilot responded, his voice tight with frustration. Bay 12 is showing occupied, requesting alternate docking assignment. Marcus sat in the medical transport bay beside Kithra's massive form, watching readouts that showed his partner's vital signs fluctuating wildly. The journey from Phoenix had been harder on the alien than anyone had anticipated. The makeshift life support systems were straining to keep Kithra stable, and every hour that passed brought them closer to complete system failure. How much longer can you maintain? Marcus whispered, leaning close to Kithra's auditory sensors. Kithra endures, came the translated response, though Marcus could hear the strain in the synthesized voice. Partnership requires endurance from both. Through the transport's viewports, Marcus could see the sprawling structure of the orbital platform. Somewhere in that mechanical labyrinth was the civilian medical facility that represented their only hope of escape. Dr. Sarah Kim had provided him with detailed schematics during what she claimed was a routine briefing, though the look in her eyes suggested she understood exactly what Marcus was planning. Platform control is directing us to Base 7, the pilot announced. Estimate 15 minutes to docking, followed by standard quarantine and transfer procedures. 15 minutes. Marcus checked the device hidden in his palm, a modified emergency beacon that Dr. Kim had quietly slipped to him during their last meeting. When activated, it would emit a signal that would interfere with Kithra's life support systems, creating the exact type of medical emergency that would justify an immediate transfer to civilian care. "Are you ready?" Marcus asked quietly. "Kithra is ready," the creature replied. "But human Marcus Chun must understand. If plan fails, Kithra will not allow harm to come to partner. We'll fight if necessary." The implications of that statement sent a chill through Marcus. Even in its weakened state, Kithra was still a bioengineered war machine. If their escape attempt went wrong, the creature might revert to its original programming to protect them both. "No fighting," Marcus said firmly. "Promise me, Kithra. Whatever happens, no violence. We do this as partners, as equals, or we don't do it at all." The massive head turned toward him, three alien eyes studying his face with an intensity that was both unnerving and strangely comforting. "Kithra promises no violence unless human Marcus Chun is directly threatened with death." It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do. The docking procedure took another 20 minutes due to what the pilot described as platform incompetence and bureaucratic nonsense. Marcus used the time to review their escape route one more time. From the docking bay, they would need to reach the emergency medical transfer station. From there, a maintenance tunnel led directly to the civilian sector. Dr. Kim had arranged for a medical team to be waiting, ostensibly to study Kithra's unique physiology for academic purposes. What she hadn't arranged was legal authorization for any of this. "Transport 7 Alpha, you are cleared for docking. Prepare for quarantine inspection and cargo transfer." The transport shuddered as it made contact with the platform's docking clamps. Through the hull, Marcus could hear the hiss of atmosphere equalizing and the mechanical whir of transfer equipment coming online. "This is it," he whispered to Kithra. "Partnership begins now," the creature replied. The cargo bay doors opened with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a standard platform loading area. A team of dock workers in environmental suits approached, along with two military officials who were obviously there to oversee Kithra's transfer to the Luna-bound ship. "Where's the medical team?" one of the officials asked, checking his data pad. "We were told there would be a full xenobiology unit waiting." The transport pilot shrugged. "They said to deliver the package here. That's all I know." Marcus felt his heart rate accelerate. This was the critical moment. He palmed the emergency beacon, feeling its weight like a stone in his hand. "Sir," he called to the nearest official, "I need to check the life support readings before we begin transfer." The creature's been showing some instability during transport. The official nodded absently, more interested in his paperwork than in Marcus's medical concerns. "Make it quick. We've got a tight schedule." Marcus approached Kithra's mobile life support unit, ostensibly to check the monitors. In reality, he was positioning himself for what came next. The alien's eyes tracked his movement, and Marcus saw understanding in that alien gaze. "Now," Kithra whispered, so quietly that only Marcus could hear. Marcus activated the beacon. Immediately, alarms began blaring throughout the cargo bay. Kithra's vital signs flatlined across multiple monitors, then spiked into dangerous territory. The life support unit began emitting warning tones that escalated rapidly from caution to emergency status. "What the hell?" the military official started. "System failure," Marcus shouted, diving toward the life support controls with practiced urgency. "Multiple organ systems are going critical. We need emergency medical intervention now." The chaos that followed was exactly what Marcus had hoped for. Dock workers scattered as alarms continued to sound. The military officials were shouting into their communicators, trying to reach their superiors. The transport pilot was demanding to know if his ship was in danger. And in the middle of it all, Kithra was putting on the performance of its life. The massive creature thrashed weakly, its biomechanical systems flickering between active and dormant states. It made sounds that didn't need translation to convey distress, mechanical groans mixed with organic cries that seemed to come from something in terrible pain. "We need to get it to a medical facility immediately," Marcus declared, making his voice carry over the chaos. "The platform's civilian medical center is the closest option." "No," one of the military officials said, finally getting control of the situation. "We have standing orders. The creature goes to Luna Station regardless of, sir, with respect, it's going to be dead in 10 minutes if we don't get it medical attention." Marcus interrupted. "Whatever your orders say, I doubt they include delivering a corpse." The official looked at his data pad, then at Kithra's apparently critical condition, then back at his data pad. Marcus could practically see him calculating the career implications of losing such a valuable asset through bureaucratic inflexibility. "Fine," the official said finally, "but minimal medical intervention only. Stabilize it and prepare for immediate transport." "Understood, sir." The next hour was a blur of activity that Marcus would later describe as controlled chaos with an emphasis on chaos. Getting Kithra moved through the platform's corridors required specialized equipment, clearance from multiple security checkpoints, and explanations to dozens of officials who all wanted to know why a classified alien weapon was being wheeled through civilian areas. Marcus answered questions, provided false technical explanations, and generally tried to project an air of medical urgency that discouraged too much scrutiny. Kithra, for its part, continued to display symptoms that were convincing enough to fool human medical equipment while being careful not to actually damage its own systems. The civilian medical facility was a revelation after the Spartan military environments Marcus was used to. Clean white corridors, actual windows showing views of Earth below, and medical equipment that was designed for healing rather than merely maintaining function. Dr. Elizabeth Santos was waiting for them, a small woman in her 50s with the kind of calm competence that came from decades of dealing with medical emergencies. She took one look at Kithra's readings and immediately began issuing orders to her staff. "I need a full bioscan, metabolic analysis, and neural activity mapping," she called out as they wheeled Kithra into the main treatment bay. "And someone get me everything we have on hegemony biomechanics." "Doctor," the military official said, stepping forward, "I need to emphasize that this is a classified military asset. Any procedures require prior authorization." "Sir," Dr. Santos replied without looking up from her instruments, "I don't care if this creature is the Emperor of Mars. Right now, it's a patient in critical condition, and I'm going to save its life. If you want to discuss authorization, you can do it with hospital administration after I've finished." Marcus felt a surge of admiration for the doctor's professional stubbornness. This was exactly the kind of person he'd hoped to find in the civilian sector. Over the next several hours, Dr. Santos and her team performed what could only be described as miraculous work. They interfaced human medical technology with Kithra's alien biology, stabilized the failing life support systems, and began the delicate process of mapping the creature's integrated biomechanical networks. And through it all, Marcus watched the military officials grow increasingly frustrated with their inability to control the situation. "Dr. Santos," the senior official said finally, "how long before the creature is stable enough for transport?" The doctor looked up from a holographic display showing Kithra's internal structure. "That depends on what you mean by stable. I can probably get the life support systems functioning well enough to keep it alive during transport in another day or two. But full recovery? We're talking weeks, possibly months of intensive care. Unacceptable. Our orders require immediate transfer to Luna Station." "Then your orders are going to result in the death of your asset," Dr. Santos replied bluntly. "This creature's physiology has been extensively modified. The integration of organic and artificial systems is beyond anything I've ever seen. Frankly, I'm amazed it survived this long." She gestured to the scanning displays. Look at this neural mapping. The biological brain has been augmented with quantum processing units that are directly interfaced with the nervous system. The artificial organs aren't just replacements. They're upgrades that have become essential for survival. Whoever designed this creature essentially created a living cyborg that requires constant technological support. Marcus saw understanding dawn in the official's eyes. This wasn't just a weapon that could be moved around at will. It was a complex organism that required specialized care to survive. How specialized? The official asked. Extremely. The technological integration is so complete that removing it from this facility without proper preparation would be like performing surgery during transport. Possible, but highly likely to result in the patient's death. The official stepped away to make a series of communications calls, leaving Marcus alone with Dr. Santos and Kythera. The creature was conscious but weak, its massive form connected to arrays of monitoring equipment that painted a complex picture of its condition. Kythera, Marcus said quietly. How are you feeling? Better than expected, came the translated response. Human medical techniques are gentler than maker modifications. Less pain. Dr. Santos looked up from her displays with surprise. It can communicate? Extensively, Marcus replied. Doctor, there's something you need to understand about this creature. Its name is Kythera, and it's not just a weapon. It's a sentient being that was enslaved and used against its will. The doctor's expression shifted from professional curiosity to something closer to horror. Enslaved? You mean it was forced to fight? Worse than that. The hegemony modified its biology to make it dependent on their technology for survival. It couldn't choose to stop being a weapon, even if it wanted to. Dr. Santos stared at Kythera with new understanding. That's monstrous. To take a sentient being and remove its ability to choose its own path. Which is why I'm asking for your help, Marcus said. Not just to keep Kythera alive, but to give it a chance at freedom. The doctor was quiet for a long moment, studying the readings from her equipment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a determination that Marcus recognized. Corporal Chun, I became a doctor because I believe in the fundamental right of all sentient beings to receive medical care regardless of their origin or circumstances. If this creature, if Kythera, is truly sentient, then it deserves the same consideration I would give any patient. Thank you, Doctor. Don't thank me yet. We still have the problem of convincing Earth Command to let me treat Kythera here rather than shipping it off to Luna Station. As if summoned by her words, the military official returned with a grim expression and a new set of orders on his datapad. Dr. Santos, I've just received updated instructions from Earth Command. The creature is to be transferred to Luna Station as soon as it's minimally stable for transport. These orders come directly from the Defense Council and are not subject to medical override. Dr. Santos straightened to her full height, which wasn't particularly impressive physically, but seemed to fill the room with authority. Sir, I'm going to explain this one more time. Moving this patient in its current condition would be medical malpractice. If Earth Command wants their asset to survive, they'll leave it here until I determine it's safe for transport. Doctor, these aren't requests. They're direct orders from people who don't have medical degrees, Dr. Santos interrupted. I don't care if the order comes from the president himself. I'm not going to be responsible for killing a patient due to political pressure. The standoff continued for several minutes, with the official making increasingly frustrated communications calls and Dr. Santos calmly returning to her work. Marcus watched it all with growing hope. They'd managed to delay the transfer to Luna Station, but he knew it was only temporary. Eventually, Earth Command would find a way to override Dr. Santos's medical authority. But every hour they gained was another hour to plan, to build support, and to find a permanent solution to Kythera's situation. Human Marcus Chun. Kythera's voice came through the speakers, weak but clear. Kythera observes human females are formidable in defensive principles. Marcus couldn't help but smile. Some of the most formidable people I've ever met. Dr. Santos, I think Kythera likes you. The doctor looked up from her displays with a surprised expression. It has opinions about people, strong ones. Kithara is very good at reading human behavior patterns. Dr. Santos approached the creature slowly, her professional curiosity clearly warring with natural caution. Kithara, can you understand me directly? Yes, Dr. Elizabeth Santos. Kithara understands. Kithara grateful for healing without pain commands. The doctor's eyes widened. Pain commands. The hegemony used pain as a control mechanism, Marcus explained. Every medical procedure, every maintenance session was associated with neural punishment to ensure compliance. That's torture, Dr. Santos said flatly. Medical torture, which is why Kithra's freedom is so important. It's not just about giving a former enemy a second chance. It's about stopping a cycle of abuse that treated a thinking being like disposable equipment. Dr. Santos nodded slowly, and Marcus could see a new resolve forming in her expression. Kithara, I want you to know that as long as you're in my care, you'll receive treatment based on medical need, not political convenience. No one will cause you unnecessary pain, and every procedure will be explained to you in advance. Dr. Santos gives Kithara choice, the creature asked, and there was wonder in its translated voice. Yes, you have the right to refuse any treatment you don't want. For the first time since arriving at the medical facility, Kithara made the grinding sound that Marcus had learned was laughter. But this time, it sounded different. Lighter somehow. More genuine. Kithara chooses to trust Dr. Elizabeth Santos and human Marcus Chun, the creature declared. Kithara chooses to heal. And in that moment, Marcus knew that whatever happened next, they had already won something important. Kithara was no longer just surviving. It was beginning to truly live. 6 months after their desperate escape from military custody, Marcus stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station and watched Kithara demonstrate something that should have been impossible. The former war machine was teaching a group of human children how to tend a hydroponic garden. Smaller seeds required gentler touch. Kithara's voice carried across the agricultural bay, translated through speakers that had become as familiar as any human voice Marcus had ever known. Kithara learned this through many failures. Plants do not respond to force commands. The children, ranging in age from 8 to 14, clustered around Kithara's massive form with a fearless curiosity that only the young possessed. They peppered the alien with questions about soil composition, light spectrums, and growing cycles, and Kithara answered each one with infinite patience. Mr. Marcus, called Sarah, a 10-year-old whose enthusiasm for xenobotany had made her Kithara's most devoted student. Kithara says that hegemony food plants taste like metal. Is that really true? Marcus smiled and moved closer to the group. That's what Kithara tells me. The hegemony designed everything for efficiency, not for taste. Human food is superior to maker food, Kithara confirmed, carefully adjusting a nutrient flow valve with one of its biomechanical appendages. Human food has complexity, layers of sensation that serve no survival function but bring pleasure. Kithara finds this concept remarkable. Dr. Elizabeth Santos approached from across the agricultural bay, data pad in hand, and a satisfied expression on her face. Over the months since Kithara's arrival at New Geneva Station, she had become more than just the alien's doctor. She had become a fierce advocate for its rights and well-being. How are our patients' motor function improvements? Marcus asked as she joined them. Remarkable, Dr. Santos replied, watching as Kithara delicately transplanted seedlings with movements that would have been impossible when they'd first arrived at the civilian medical facility. The new interface protocols we've developed have given Kithara much finer control over its biomechanical systems. But more importantly, the psychological improvements have been extraordinary. Marcus nodded, remembering the traumatized, resigned creature he'd found dying in a crater in Phoenix. The being before him now bore little resemblance to that broken war machine. Kithara moved with purpose rather than mere function, spoke with curiosity rather than mere compliance, and had developed what could only be called personality quirks. For instance, the alien had become obsessed with Earth music, particularly classical compositions. It spent hours listening to symphonies and analyzing the mathematical relationships between notes. Last week, it had attempted to compose its own piece, which sounded like what Marcus imagined a conversation between whales and computers might produce. Dr. Santos, came Kithra's voice from across the bay. Kitara request consultation en flooring cycle. Earth plants demonstrate seasonal responses that confuse former weapon logic. The doctor smiled and headed over to examine Kithra's latest botanical project. Marcus followed, marveling at how normal this had all become. A former alien war machine asking for gardening advice while surrounded by human children was now just another Tuesday afternoon. The issue, Kithra explained as they approached, is that Kithra understands optimal growing conditions through calculation. Light spectrum, nutrient density, atmospheric composition. But human plants seem to require something beyond optimization. Dr. Santos examined the flowering plants in question, a variety of earth roses that Kithra had been attempting to cultivate. What makes you think there's something beyond the physical conditions? Observation, Kithra replied. Same conditions, same nutrients, same care protocols. But plants cared for by humans consistently outperform plants cared for by Kithra. Variables are identical, yet results differ. Marcus found himself grinning. Kithra, have you considered that maybe plants respond to emotional connection? The alien's three eyes focused on him with the intensity that Marcus had learned indicated deep processing. Emotional connection has measurable effect on plant growth. Some people think so, Dr. Santos said. There are studies suggesting that plants respond to the emotional states of their caretakers. Nothing proven, but the data is intriguing. How does one form emotional connection with plant? Kithra asked, and there was genuine curiosity in its voice. Well, Marcus said, settling down beside one of the larger planters. You start by thinking of the plant not as an object to be optimized, but as a living thing with its own needs and preferences. You pay attention to how it responds to different conditions, and you care about its well-being. Kithra already cares about plant well-being. Dying plants represent failure of care protocols. No, that's different. You care about the outcome. I'm talking about caring about the plant itself, regardless of whether it succeeds or fails. Kithra was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the children had returned to their own gardening projects, chattering among themselves about seeds and soil and the alien who had become their unlikely mentor. Kithra does not understand distinction, the alien said finally. Dr. Santos knelt down beside Marcus, her expression thoughtful. Kithra, when you were a weapon for the hegemony, did your makers care about your well-being? Makers maintained Kithra's function, ensured survival for mission completion. But did they care about you as an individual? About your happiness or comfort or preferences? Another long pause. No, individual preferences were inefficient variables to be suppressed. And how did that feel? Dr. Santos asked gently. The question seemed to hit Kithra like a physical blow. The massive creature's biomechanical systems flickered as it processed something that was clearly difficult to articulate. Felt empty, Kithra said finally. Kithra existed, functioned, obeyed. But existence had no meaning beyond function, no purpose beyond destruction. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Even after 6 months of freedom, Kithra was still discovering what it meant to be treated as a person rather than as equipment. That's the difference, Marcus said softly. The hegemony cared about your output, but not about you. When we care about these plants, we care about them as individual living things, not just as sources of food or beauty. Human Marcus Chun cares about Kithra as individual, the alien asked, and there was something vulnerable in its voice. Yes, Marcus replied without hesitation. I care about your happiness, your growth as a person, your dreams for the future. Not because of what you can do for me, but because you're you. The agricultural bay fell silent except for the hum of environmental systems and the distant chatter of children. Kithera's biomechanical systems pulsed in patterns that Dr. Santos had identified as indicating deep emotional processing. Kithera wishes to try caring about plants as individuals, the alien said finally. Will human Marcus Chun teach proper emotional connection protocols? Marcus laughed, surprising himself with the sound. It's not really something you can program, Kithera. It's something you feel. But I can help you learn to recognize what caring feels like. Over the next hour, Marcus guided Kithera through what he privately thought of as empathy training. They examined each plant in the garden, discussing its unique characteristics, growth patterns, and needs. More importantly, they talked about what made each plant special beyond its mere function. This rose bush, Marcus explained, pointing to a particularly vigorous specimen, was grown from a cutting that belonged to Sarah's grandmother. It's not just a source of flowers. It's a connection to family history, to memories of someone who was loved. Plant carries emotional significance beyond biological function, Kithera observed. Exactly. And when Sarah tends this plant, she's not just maintaining its physical health. She's honoring her grandmother's memory and continuing a tradition that connects her to her family. Kithera studied the rose bush with new attention. Kithera begins to understand. Plant exists in network of relationships and meanings that extend beyond individual organism. Now you're getting it. As the day progressed, Marcus watched something remarkable happen. Kithera began interacting with the plants differently, moving more slowly, speaking to them softly, even humming bits of the classical music it had grown to love. The children noticed the change too, gathering around to watch the alien demonstrate this new approach to gardening. "Why is Kithera talking to the plants?" asked Tommy, an 8-year-old whose directness had endeared him to everyone in the agricultural program. "Because," Kithera replied, "plants are individuals deserving of recognition and care." Talking helps Kithera remember that each plant has unique worth. Dr. Santos appeared at Marcus's elbow, her expression mixing pride and amazement. "Do you realize what we just witnessed?" she whispered. Kithera learning empathy? More than that. We just watched a being that was engineered to be a weapon discover the capacity for love. Marcus felt tears stinging his eyes as the full impact of Dr. Santos's words hit him. 6 months ago, Kithera had been a broken, dying war machine that had never been allowed to choose anything for itself. Now it was teaching human children, composing music, and learning to love plants for their own sake rather than their utility. "Mr. Marcus," Sarah called from across the garden. "Kithera wants to know if we can plant something special for the anniversary celebration next week." Marcus looked confused. "Anniversary celebration?" Dr. Santos smiled. "The anniversary of Kithera's arrival at New Geneva Station. The children want to throw a party to celebrate what they're calling Kithera's Freedom Birthday." The massive alien's attention focused on them with obvious interest. "Children wish to celebrate Kithera's existence?" "Not just your existence," Sarah said, approaching with the confidence that had made her a natural leader among the children. "We want to celebrate you choosing to be more than what you were made to be. Kithera the gardener, not Kithera the weapon." The biomechanical systems that comprised much of Kithera's body began pulsing in the pattern that Dr. Santos had identified as the alien equivalent of crying. But these weren't tears of grief or pain. They were tears of joy. Kithera would be honored to plant Celebration Garden with human friends, the alien said, and its voice carried an emotion that Marcus had never heard before, pure happiness. As the afternoon wore on, the group planned an elaborate garden that would commemorate not just Kithera's transformation, but the broader principle that any being could choose to become more than what others had made them. They would plant flowers from Earth alongside adapted species from other worlds, creating a living symbol of diversity and growth. "You know," Dr. Santos said quietly as they watched Kithera explain pollination techniques to an enraptured audience of children. 6 months ago, I thought we were just saving the life of a unique alien. I didn't realize we were witnessing the birth of a new kind of person." Marcus nodded, thinking about all the official reports, legal challenges, and media attention that had surrounded Kithra's case. The being before him had become more than just a former weapon-seeking asylum. It had become a symbol of redemption and the power of choice. Dr. Santos, Kithra called from across the garden. Kithra requests assistance with anniversary garden planning, wishes to include plants that demonstrate concept of transformation. What do you have in mind? She asked, moving closer. Seeds that become flowers. Caterpillars that become flying creatures. Growth that represents possibility rather than mere function. Marcus smiled, watching his partner plant a garden that would celebrate the very transformation they had both undergone. Kithra was no longer the broken war machine he had found dying in a crater, just as Marcus was no longer simply a soldier following orders. They had both become something new, partners, friends, and proof that anyone could choose to be more than what they were made to be. As the artificial sunset began to dim the lights in the agricultural bay, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a simple decision to show mercy to a dying enemy, but it had become something much larger, a demonstration that empathy, choice, and the willingness to see personhood in unexpected places could transform the world. Human Marcus Chun, Kithra said as they prepared to leave the garden for the day. Kithra wishes to express gratitude. For what? For teaching Kithra that existence can have meaning beyond function. For showing Kithra that choice creates possibility. For demonstrating that care without purpose is the most purposeful care of all. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. Thank you, Kithra, for teaching me that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with kindness. Together, the former soldier and the former weapon walked through the corridors of New Geneva Station, surrounded by the human children who had accepted an alien war machine as their friend and teacher. Behind them, in the agricultural bay, the plants they had tended together grew in soil nourished by something that couldn't be measured or programmed. Love given freely, without expectation of return. It was, Marcus thought, the most human thing imaginable. And perhaps the most alien, too. The war between Earth and the hegemony was officially over, ended by treaties and ceasefires and political negotiations. But the real victory, Marcus realized, was happening in quiet moments like these, when beings chose compassion over hatred, growth over destruction, and connection over isolation. Kithra had been abandoned by its makers to die alone and forgotten. Instead, it had found family, purpose, and the revolutionary discovery that existence could be beautiful simply for its own sake. And that, Marcus knew, was the most unthinkable thing of all.